This is the Pythagorean theorem. And just to remind ourselves what the Pythagorean theorem is, we've got a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And that is given a right angle triangle where the legs are a and b respectively, and the hypotenuse is c. Now, just so we understand, Khan Academy will actually ask you to put in, to give your solution in the form of either a radical, like the square root of 8, or 2 times the square root of 2. What that means is that it is not expecting you to simplify your answer. Just so you understand, the square root of 8 has 3 factors: the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 times the square root of 2. 2 times 2 times 2 is 8, which means that 2 of those square roots could be multiplied by each other and could come outside the radical and be given as 2 times the square root of 2 as a simplified square root. But that is not necessary in this particular question. So when you see this form here, it's not actually necessary. You could actually ignore the front of that and just give your form, your answer in square root form, and you should be okay. The one time that I would honestly suggest that you give it in rational form is if it's a perfect square root and you know the answer to it. Like, say you were given the square root of 9. Well, then the square root of 9 is just 3, and you can pull that out. We notice we're looking for b. Okay, we're actually looking for b, which means that we've got to rewrite this equation just for b. Okay, so we want b squared equals c squared minus a squared. And that's because we want to subtract a squared from both sides so that we can actually get b on his own, right? The next thing we can actually do is, because we've got b squared here and we're actually looking for b, we can actually take the square root of both sides. And if we take the square root of both sides, then that actually cancels out. The square cancels out with the square root. Okay, so we can actually erase that part right there, and we have b is equal to the square root of c squared minus a squared. Okay, so knowing how to manipulate this equation, this Pythagorean theorem around so it suits us, is a key component of being able to do this properly. Now we just plug in the values we're looking for. So we're looking for b. We've got that is equal to the square root of 7 squared. 7 squared is 49, minus a squared, and that's 3 squared is 9. So we're actually got the square root of 40. And it seems that Khan Academy is perfectly happy with us putting in 40. Just so you are aware, we could factorize 40. Just so you're aware, 40, of course, the square root of 40 becomes square root of 2 times the square root of 20. The square root of 20 becomes the square root of 2 times the square root of 10. And if you look, the square root of 10 becomes the square root of 5 times the square root of 2. Now, this last piece here, the square root of 5 times the square root of 2, is kind of useless to us. But these two square roots are actually very useful to us, because when you multiply these together, it cancels out the square roots. So we actually end up with just 2 on the outside and the square root of 10 on the inside. And either of these two answers is acceptable to Khan Academy. Okay, so just to show you that it's not necessarily asking for the simplified form, I'm going to put it in the unsimplified form so that you can see that Khan Academy is perfectly happy with that. Okay, so let's look at another problem, just so that we can really be certain of what we're doing here. Again, let's remind ourselves that a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And in this particular case, we actually have a and b. We're looking for c. So the only thing we really want to do is we want to take the square root of both sides. And that, of course, on this side cancels out the square. And we end up with c equals the square root of a squared plus b squared. Right? When we do that, we can plug in what a and b are. So c is equal to the square root of a is 6, so a squared is 36. And b is 7, so b squared is 49. Okay, so c is equal to the square root of 36 plus 49, which of course is 85. So 85, of course, is 5 times 17, but that's irrelevant. We don't need to do anything to it anyway. So we're just happy with just putting in 85 right here, and we're done. I would like to look at just one more with you so that you can actually see, again, another situation where we need to manipulate the formula to find what we're looking for. We don't have A, we've got B and C, which means that we're looking for A squared equals C squared minus B squared. And of course, we can cancel out this square by taking the square root over here. So let's tidy that up just a little bit. That's A is equal to the square root of C squared minus B squared. Okay, plug that in. So that's the square root of 9 squared is 81 minus 16. 81 minus 16 is 65. And we don't, whether we can simplify it or not, we don't really care, because there is no need to take a step that Khan Academy doesn't need us to do. So hopefully that's kind of enough for you to get on and actually try a couple of questions for yourself.